Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. We've got a full house here today for the AMA with Kaela. And I'm going to just put on a little background music. We actually played this music in the last event, and I think people liked it, so just keep it going.
Sets the mood.
Yes. Awesome. We'll just wait a couple minutes for everyone to join, then we'll kick off. It always shocks me how global these events can be. Got all over Europe, both coasts, middle of the country.
Kaela fan club has arrived.
I saw my Leon in there. Hi, Leon.
Great.
Yeah, it's cool to see all the locations.
LA, Brazil. Cool. Well, we will just wait another 1 or 2 minutes and then get going. Just so everyone knows, there's some great emojis on the bottom here that you can play around with and react whenever Kaela says something funny or something that you love or makes you want to party. Hello. Okay. Looks like we've got a full house here today. I'm gonna turn the music off. Alrighty. Well, thank you everyone for joining. We are joined here for another amazing AMA with Kaela. She is very special individual in the ReOps world, and we're excited to hear all about her story, her background, her advice on all things research ops. And just so everyone is aware, my name is Oren. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at Rally, and we are building a user research CRM. So working with lots of organizations to streamline the whole participant management and recruitment process, reducing the barrier and the gap between researchers and their users to enable just more seamless, rapid research. So that's not going to be the topic of today's AMA, but if you are interested, you can feel free to reach out. I'll drop my email in the chat a little bit later. But in the meantime, Kaela, would love it if you could kick us off with a quick introduction on who you are and your path into research ops.
I would be honored to. So hi, everyone. I'm Kaela Tuttle-Royer. I have been I guess I should start about just who I am as a human being. I'm from California, little town, or it used to be a little town just right outside of Sacramento. Spent most of my college years and early career in San Francisco, so in the tech space, and then took a chance, dragged my husband out here to the East Coast. Now live in Manhattan, West Coast girl trying to make it in the Big Apple, and I'm absolutely loving it. In terms of my career in research operations, I started as a researcher. And if anyone of you looked at my bio, my undergrad is in essentially exercise physiology. I thought I'd work in gym clothes. I wanted to be a researcher for Gatorade. That was the dream. I loved it. I pursued it. I was working in an occupational medical center and had an incredible colleague just kind of put to me, what else is next? And I followed that instinct sitting in my little janitor's closet and applied for a job online at Fitbit to be an associate researcher. Got in there, did some great things in the research space, learned a lot about research, especially from a hardware perspective and about how to protect our users' anonymity and their privacy. But I kept leaning into the ops space and I felt like, there's something here. I didn't even know research operations was a thing. If you Googled it, you'd find things in the clinical space, but nothing in tech. And tech was obviously, where I wanted to be. Who doesn't when they're in San Francisco, 5 years ago. So I leaned into that instinct and I found a role at Dropbox. And, it was positioned as research operations coordinator. Wasn't really sure what it was. It seemed to kind of be what I liked to do and what I wanted to learn how to do. So I took a chance and I went over to Dropbox, and that's where I really learned participant management. Loved it, did it inside and out, could do it in my sleep. I learned from one of the best out there. I will give a shameless shout out to Erica Atencion, who taught me everything about participant management. Learned it, loved it, but wanted to do more. And so that's where I look for my next opportunity to really lean into the strategy of research ops and how we can be more than a participant management team. And we can look to really elevate the craft of research, both for the researchers and for the organization. So I took a chance, went over to Spotify and spent some time building teams there with some incredible individuals. And ultimately, by the end of my time there, was working as the Global Insights Operations Manager. And so what that meant was no longer solving research operations problems for researchers, but thinking about the research process as it related to market researchers, user researchers, and data scientists. So all the people who kind of come together and make research happen. That was amazing. Loved it. And then through an amazing connection of mine, got an opportunity to go to Airtable. It was a company I believed in, a product that I believed in as an operations minded person, and was really excited about not just building a team there, but potentially building a research solution at Airtable. Went over there, enjoyed it, loved it. My main focuses were building, a research operations program from scratch. There was someone there who was incredible already doing it. So we just kind of refined it, tweaked it, and scaled it. And then we were solving for things like as ReOps, how do we grow that into the enterprise space? How do we make it easier to recruit enterprise users? How do we use our research to influence enterprise growth? And then got to dabble in research democratization. I love it. It's something that I've touched in all of my roles really so far, starting at Dropbox, and worked with an incredible individual there, Nash. Just amazing human. And Nash and I really worked on scaling research democratization for designers and product managers and anyone who really wanted to get their hands dirty with it. So unfortunately, like a lot of you probably on this call, a lot of people out there in the industry, that journey ended a lot sooner than I had anticipated. So I have a lot of sympathy for all of us out there and both who have survived layoffs and who have been laid off. And that's where I'm at. So I've had a fantastic experience building research ops teams and really just leaning in and looking for that next opportunity for a full-time role in the space. So that's a bit about me. Hopefully that doesn't bore anyone, but that's who I am.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Kaela, for the thorough introduction and amazing story. Starting in a janitor's closet, looking for a role with Fitbit, all the way to some of the biggest names in tech. So you mentioned layoffs. Of course, this is something that's facing a lot of the industry right now, and something that it's a hard topic to discuss, and people are craving to hear more about others' experiences, about how they're navigating this environment. So as someone who is going through this, we'd love to hear, and we even got a few questions submitted about what was this like? How do you handle that experience? How have you been navigating this time? What advice do you have for others that are currently in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I want to start by saying there is no one size fits all approach. I think you get a lot of people with a lot of fantastic advice, but the best thing to do is just what's going to make you feel like you're back in control. I mean, being laid off is traumatic. We just have to be honest about it. It's traumatic, it's jarring, it's destabilizing. It really leaves you, or at least it left me, feeling really out of control of, my life, my career, my finances. No matter how good the severance package is, you go into work, you have a job, and within an hour, suddenly you don't. And I think that, the best thing that I did was, I took a minute, literally, and I thought, what's going to make me feel better today than I am right now in this moment, sitting in tears on my couch? And that was understanding, who's in my network and what's out there. What are my job opportunities? That helped me. A lot of people like to sit and think through what's next, how do I feel? And that is so okay to do. That just isn't what I wanted to do. So I got on LinkedIn. I emailed Oren, I will admit, probably within an hour of being laid off, just to say, hey, I'm in this situation. You're amazing. I just want you to know, and let's network. So I think, the key is to, take a breath, figure out yourself and what's going to get you through, lean on your network. And then from there, once you kind of get some space from it all, if possible, think about, what's the impact I've made so far in my career? I think that when you get laid off, it's very easy to feel like, what could I have done differently? What did I do wrong? What did my team do wrong? And I don't think that's healthy. I think it's actually better to think about, what am I proud of? What have I done? What have I accomplished? And how do I want to go and put that impact into other places? And what place do I want to give my value to? We are all high value people. I've been laid off twice. It is not fun either time. It's jarring both times, but you really have to think about, what can I do and where do I want to take those skills and feel happy at the end of the day? We can't control layoffs. We can only control what we do when we're in a company and how we respond to it. So in terms of research ops specific advice, I think one thing that, I could have done a better job of, and that I'm learning, is network before the layoff. Don't be afraid, make it part of your routine to be in LinkedIn at least once a week. Network with people, subscribe to things like this, learn from people, take every message in your inbox with care. Everyone is a human. We need to respond to each other as humans. We need to give each other time. Don't leave people on red, so that if you are ever in this type of position, you have that network and you have people who just make you feel good and just remind you about a lot of the work that you did. And then, sometimes there's not a lot of jobs in research ops, and that can be really scary. I think the one thing is, don't be afraid to take contract opportunities seriously. Work with agencies, work with recruiting staff, tailor your resume. And that's where it goes back to understanding the impact that you've had. Find metrics that attach to the impact that you've had. Build your resume around it. Get some advice on that resume, and then just lean in and take the risks. Take every phone call to heart. You never know where your next opportunity lies. And, I'm always happy to talk to you individually too. I'm a friendly face on LinkedIn, knock on my figurative door, and I'm happy to tell you what worked for me and connect you with other people who might be looking for someone just like you. So that's my advice. Do what you want with it, but trust your instinct, and just remember, you're a human. You have feelings. They can be ugly, but you have value, and it's just the next company will be even more luckier to have you.
Amazing advice. Thank you for that. Sure. Yeah, lots of good nuggets in there for people, and it's really the perseverance that you've shown has been I think the key thing driving. So really comes across. Cool. Well, let's take it back maybe to your early career and talk us through what it was like joining Dropbox as an early ReOps hire, and as your career grew, obviously the role and the function grew into something that is now, instrumental within organizations. So I would love to hear what that journey was like for you.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I could talk about this for days. I think
question.
That I will try not to. I think that in terms of joining Dropbox early on, I learned everything I know about participant management from my manager, and she really took a chance on me. And that's something that I like to carry through to, as a hiring manager in previous roles. And, you have to learn two things very early on. If you're an early ResOps hire, you have to understand, who are your researchers, who are their stakeholders, and what do they care about? If you don't know that information, you can't really be an effective partner. And then from there, you have to understand, who are our users? Who do we care about, and what do they care about? That's what's going to make you a superpower. And that's what's going to make you someone who not only grows yourself in your career, but who grows the function of research operations within your company. So that was a really exciting thing I got to do at Dropbox. Is I got brought in to manage participant recruitment. I was one of two. And by the end of our time, I think we ended up having 4 hires. We were in bigger rooms. We were making bigger impact. We were driving programs. We were tackling things like research democratization. And that was because we knew our stuff and we considered ourselves subject matter experts in our users. I think the other thing that was really special about Dropbox and my manager there was that we fell in love with our users. We didn't just see them as numbers, n equals 5. Those 5 people have a life, have a business, and sometimes you as ResOps are the only person a user will ever meet at a company. So you're the only face they can put to these big fancy household names. And so I really learned to embed care for the user into everything that I did, and that really kept me grounded in terms of what my job was when looking at research processes, especially in the recruitment space. And I think from there I took that same attitude into Spotify, into Airtable, and your stakeholders shift. If you're not just managing participants, you have to care about what your researchers, want. And so it wasn't just about designing processes that increased efficiency in research and in our partner relationships, but how are we making sure everything we're doing isn't just embedding care and delight for our users, but we're thinking about the privacy. I love, I always think of people like, if this was my mom, how would I want someone to talk to her, to treat her, to, think about her data on the back end. And I think that's another kind of superpower that I've tried to use throughout my career. And Spotify is really where I got to see, what does it mean for research ops to expand into other functions? Research does not happen in a silo. We have data scientist partners, we have designers, we have product managers, engineering managers. Everyone is touching our research. And so we need to be thinking about whether our processes speak their language. And I think that's what I really learned and dug into at Spotify was, I'm not just creating a process for a researcher. This process has to make sense when they ask their data scientists for something. So if I say step 5 is ask your data scientist for a query, I better know that the data scientist can do that thing and that they understand what they're being asked for, and that I've created a process that works for them too. Because a lot of times people aren't organizationally motivated to support research. A lot of times it's just, hey, can you just do this thing for me? So we need to make sure we're making a valuable use of our partners' times. And I think at Airtable, what I really learned was, how do we build systems that can track our metrics, that can drive the impact and the story that we can tell about how important research operations is. So setting up Airtable bases and setting up surveys and things like that, where we can go every month, we can go and say, this number proves our success and it proves how we're measuring against the company objective. So that's where I really got, learned that sweet spot, even in a short amount of time, about making research ops accountable for driving business objectives and being able to show how we did that thing. And on top of it, just elevating research across an organization. A lot of times people say research is too slow. What does that mean? And how do I affect that? And how do I find metrics to show whether that's the case or not? And just getting really tight on the idea of research and where it sits within a company. So it's just a bit about kind of what I've learned and the experience it's been, growing up in research operations. It's an ever-changing field. I mean, director of research operations never existed in tech when I first started on my journey. So being able to see what has come from research ops and the amazing people that have made that happen has just been really humbling and a blessing in my career.
Amazing. I think you hit on a lot of really great points that I'm sure people are very curious about. We've gotten a lot of questions before the session here on measuring impact of research ops. And you kind of hinted to the ability to connect the company's objectives with research objectives and with research ops, and building these systems to track metrics that tell the story and impact of research ops. Tell us a little bit more about maybe how you specific examples of ways you've been able to do this. I think people are always trying to figure out, how do I create this? How do I level this up?
Yeah, I think, the 2 best examples I can give, because I think it's something that majority of companies or people in research ops can align with, is the biggest one is look at your tools. At least for me, managing tooling and budget and vendors was always something that my team was tasked with. So my mind goes to ROI. How can I prove that, 1, how do I understand the ROI of our current tooling? both financially and from a satisfaction level and a quality level. And then how do I go about affecting that in my team and proving that we're the ones that affected it? So you can be doing things like looking at your total budget spend, looking at the usage of those tools, and then thinking about, okay, let's say with Qualtrics, we're spending X amount of dollars. Are we using all of our seats? Are we using all of these incredible licenses that we've gotten underneath this account? And then getting really crisp on what can we live without? What can we be back billing to other teams? And how do we make sure that when it comes to contract renewal, we come in with a strong case against why we need to grow or why we need to cut back on that? So a lot of that is, financial modeling, digging into the numbers, working with your account executives to pull numbers. Or if you personally, as a ResOps person, don't have those skills, you can find those skills in a CW. I worked with an incredible CW at Spotify who was able to come in and make a bit more sense of the numbers in a space where we could scale it. So I think tooling and vendors and spend, especially in today's market, CW is a contract worker. Sorry if that helps. So I think that in today's market, we as research ops professionals, we can really show our value and metrics by, scrapping programs, saying, no, this actually isn't where we should be spending money. This isn't adding quality to our teams. I think that, it can be scary to start telling people you're doing things the wrong way. So do that with care, do that, when you feel comfortable doing it, and do it with numbers. I think that the other thing is, I've worked in a couple teams now where the business objective was growing enterprise growth, and research should be able to help drive that. So at Airtable, one of the things we found was that although research was tasked with growing enterprise growth, it wasn't happening fast enough. And so what I went in and did is I understood first, I have all this anecdotal information about, why is this not happening? It's taking too long, but I needed numbers. So I went about identifying places where I could be driving numbers through tracking things within Airtable bases or email turnaround times, or using, my recruiting partner or ResOps partner and saying, how long is it actually taking for research to get done? And then from there, thinking about who are the people that can help me affect this, and then partnering with sales teams and operations teams and saying, okay, if we wanted to, decrease the time spent to recruit enterprise users, what are the levers that we have to pull to make that happen? And then keeping an eye on that metric and establishing places where you're collecting those metrics so you can constantly be measuring back and be able to say, hopefully at the end of a quarter, we reduced time to recruit enterprise users by 70%, which meant we were able to do more enterprise research, which meant we were able to grow the enterprise business, in theory, more for the company.
Love it. Very actionable on ways to bridge those gaps and bridge those connections between your goals and the company's objectives, which is awesome. So there was a question that came in during that moment from Angie. She's asking, how did you determine what ROI metrics your leaders cared about? So if you can quickly touch on that piece.
Yeah, great question. I mean, it's through conversation. I think that a lot of the things that you have to understand is at least in my experience, my researchers had a different understanding of what ROI meant than my leaders did. And the leaders had a different understanding of what ROI was than my FP&A or my financial accounting teams did. So going in and understanding, finance cares about whether we should be spending that amount of money, and that amount of money is, generating what it should be internally. My directors cared about making sure that our tools and what we were spending on our tools allowed our researchers to get into the different markets and conduct the different research they wanted to do. ROI for our researchers meant the time they spent in process working with a vendor. In theory, it should be easier to work with a vendor or outsource your research than it is to do it on your own. So understanding those three metrics, and it always depends on where you are in the org. Are you feeling the most pressure from finance because budgets are being cut? Are you feeling the most pressure from director level because they're not sure whether research ops or research is, a high value add? They're getting questions from partners. Or are your researchers, are you finding attrition in your researchers? And does this ROI have something to do with it? So understand which one is the bigger pressure, which one you should prioritize, and then prioritize that ROI and work through the rest of them. I think that's one space where I can always learn more. I don't consider myself an expert in ROI. That's why I mentioned I brought a contractor in who I felt was, and I learned a lot from her. So that kind of speaks to that. Don't be afraid to admit that you're not the smartest person in the room, and find those partners who can help you learn those skills and who can lean on you, because we're only as good as our team. And so that's definitely something that I hope that answers the question, but that's how I tackle it.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And just so the audience knows as well, I opened up the Q&A so you can start adding some questions in there, voting on each other's questions, and we'll spend the last 15, 20 minutes or so answering those questions. But in the meantime, Kaela, another topic that you had kind of chimed in about as you were talking about your growth within the space was the sort of expanding need for research ops within cross-functional areas like market research, data science, and I know you've been through a lot of wins and losses in those arenas, and I would love to just hear a little bit more about that and what you think this means for the future of research ops.
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think that I think the best, most, the best companies the best setup I have seen, if you will, and again, just from my personal ideas and preferences, is the model of data scientists and researchers, user or market, sitting together and solving problems together and being accountable for driving the same business goal together. I think that when you situate those teams in a space where they're organizationally motivated to help each other and the success of each other, their successes depend on each other and it depends on their performance at the end of the year. I think that's where you're going to see the magic happen. And it's not just in collaboration and, quicker insights and learning from each other, but it's also in speaking the same language. If everyone's coming to the table, you can learn that a data scientist, they talk about audience in this language, or they talk about it in this query language, and researchers talk about it this way. So how do we create glossaries? How do we share the knowledge? And I think that if you aren't you don't have that benefit of people being organizationally motivated, it's about identifying and creating discipline groups so that those discipline groups can help you as an ops person drive the resources, drive the processes that will help each other. And what I mean by that is, find 5 researchers that you feel, really have a handle on what's going on at the company. They have a handle on what research is in general, and do the same in the data science group. Tap on those for your resources, gut check your processes and your priorities against those groups, and then have those groups talk to each other. And then if you want to get really crazy, have those same groups exist in product and design and other partner teams and have them all talk together. You would be amazed by what will happen by just bringing them into the same room. And that's one of the big things that I've found is if people can speak the same language, they feel like they have a seat at the table and they feel like everyone is benefiting from each other in a symbiotic way, magic can happen. And then research ops is positioned in a really special place where you can think about how your process decisions or your initiatives not just affect a researcher, but all the other people involved in the research life cycle. And that's where I think you really add to the value of the business.
I love that. I love it. I think it's a common theme with a lot of the things that have led to your success is bringing people together and realizing that everyone is a human, whether they're a participant and they need to be treated in a certain way, or a cross-functional that you may not be working with on a day-to-day basis may have a very different day-to-day. The conversation can break down those barriers and lead to really productive working relationships.
Definitely.
Cool. So another topic that I know kind of chimed in on in the past was on different structures for research ops teams, particularly in a global environment. So you've been in some pretty large organizations with embedded research ops, horizontal research ops. Would love to hear maybe some of your experiences with those different org structures and pros and cons.
Yeah, definitely. So what I think Spotify is probably the greatest example, and you can see so much of Spotify's information on the internet, so it's safer to talk about. But in terms of operations, that experience, research operations sat towards the end of my time independent of insights. It sat under R&D operations, and we were horizontal. And our researchers were embedded, and they weren't just embedded in business units, they were embedded in certain other areas deeper into those business units. And I think, I came in, that was the first time working in that style of organization. And I quickly found I was one person to roughly 75 embedded researchers. How do I, as one person, solve for problems that all the researchers are having given their various, functions and focuses and things like that? And so my gut reaction was, I need to understand what's common here. What is the majority struggling with? And that should be the first thing I go about tackling. And I think the best way to do that is, if you have the luxury, do meet and greets, understand the whole team. Now, as one person with 75, it's not really reasonable. So I had some conversations and then I leaned on my leadership. I said, if you had to pick one person to represent your team, who would it be? And again, give them a seat at the table, bring them all together, have these conversations, gut check your initiatives against them, because it's not realistic for one person sitting centrally and horizontally to really know what someone sitting, in the international space in Singapore is dealing with. So finding someone who can escalate those voices up and can advocate for those voices so that I can hear them and I can also disseminate my solutions down into those groups. So it's not just about creating programs horizontally, but making sure they're being adopted at those, those bottom levels. That's something that, taught me a lot. And I think that it also adds to trust and leadership. I think the other thing that's really interesting to mention is that a lot of times, as I have matured in my career, my main stakeholders become director level researchers or research leaders. And so, you get in rooms with directors and they have many other things they're thinking about. They have a lot of other, things that are top of mind, solutions they're looking for. And researchers might be screaming like, I can't even get a recruit done. So having those practice groups or those people to lean on allows for you to also be able to elevate their stories, tell those stories up the chain and connect the dots. I think embedded research ops has also been amazing. I love to roll into a research director. I think that it's a superpower if you guys can be working together and solving for things proactively. Researchers have superpowers, ops people have superpowers. If they're sitting together, it's amazing. And that was my experience at Airtable. And that was really, really powerful, being able to be embedded in a centralized research team that did have its different product areas, but that ultimately was all accountable to the same research director. And I think that, that's a different experience. That's more about making sure that you are part of the team. You're a part of the core research function. They see you as a resource and a thought leader, not just a service team, but a thought leader and a subject matter expert. So I think you have to kind of be able to say, what's the lay of the land? What are my powers? And how do I get strategic about the resourcing that's available to me? And how do I make the biggest value add for the research team and for the company?
Amazing. Yeah, all about the strategic partnership. And sorry, my video turned off, so I'm now on this camera. We'll
You're still at the beach, so it's fine.
Yes, exactly. It's all that matters. Awesome. Well, I want to jump to maybe one of the Q&As, the most popular one so far from Mr. Christopher Nash, just kind of the opposite about what we just discussed, which is going into a pretty large organization with pretty established research functions. But what about if you are the first research ops hire at a company with a nascent research practice, which is probably more likely for a lot of the folks in the room today. Where would you start? How do you think about prioritizing? After you get a grasp on your stakeholders, what comes next?
Great question. Where do I begin? I think that, I like to start with, you have to have your North Star. I always say, have a North Star. A lot of times you'll get lucky and a research manager will say, these are the things I'm expecting of you, or these are the things that are expected of research. But you need to really understand, why am I here? What was my job description? Why did someone come out of the woodworks and say, we want to pay for this role? And use that and make sure everything that you find and everything that you do levels into that. From there, you have to go and you have to have meet and greets. You have to talk with your people. You have to talk to the researchers. And it's not just what could we do better? What do you want? It's where are they coming from? Are they academic? Are they coming from a huge company like Meta? Are they coming from a startup? Are they coming from an agency? And that piece, I think, is something that I developed a bit further on in my career. And it's something that really comes into play when you think about influencing, when you have created those solutions and you need to influence people to actually adopt to them. So do all your meet and greets and then do an analysis, distill the trends, do your research on that. Say, okay, what are the top 3 trends that I'm seeing here? And it doesn't have to be a solution-based trend. It can just be researchers feel that it's, they can't properly plan with their partners because the timelines vary too much and it's creating stress for them. Okay, what can I do about that? And if I do something about that, how does that level into why I was brought here and what I meant to do in my role? And then from there, you have to get really realistic about, let's say from that example, you say, okay, it seems like we need a hub that brings in all the information of how to do research. And it's not just something that researchers use, it's something that our partners can look at so they can understand why it might be taking a bit longer to recruit our users. How do you do that? You have to bite size it down, and you have to get realistic about what you can affect and what you can't affect. And you have to look at the lay of the land in terms of your partners. My meet and greets always include people in privacy, legal, security, community, sometimes L&D, so that I already have those connections and I might already be aware of things that are in progress for them. So I can say, you know what, L&D is going to come in with a bit of a collaboration workshop. So that's not really something I need to put on my roadmap right now. So looking at the lay of the land, leveraging your partners, landing on one solution that you know that you can deliver in a timely way. I think that the biggest thing, if you're a brand new ResOps hire into an org that's never had it before or is still very, early on in the development, is quick, big impact wins. You don't want to wait till month 9 to deliver something. You're going to make people live in the wild, wild west, and it's going to be hard to bring them into your processes. Find high value ads that you can make. It could even be, this is how you get access to Qualtrics. Throw out some quick guides and then dig into the nitty gritty and do everything in parallel. You should never be working on just one initiative in the early days. You should have multiple things going, and you should be able to tell the story of how those all level up into the main resource you're looking to build. And then I think from there, it's gut checking, feedback loops. I use feedback loops at every single stage of my work. I embed feedback loops in my forms. I embed them in my websites. I'm constantly asking in team meetings if anyone wants to put an eye on something. I think the key there, and it's just a piece of advice that I got during my time at Spotify, was be conscientious about what you're asking your researchers to do. If you are leaning on them for feedback, you are going to them with meet and greets, make sure you're very clear about what you're asking them to do and why it's important and what the outcome will be. If you become a time suck, they will not help you. And I can't blame them. There's nothing worse than a meeting just to meet and giving people feedback that feels like it just lives in a black box. So that's where it comes to that influencing piece. Make sure you understand how you're going to tell the story about why you did what you did, how the team helped you, and how they have autonomy in adjusting it and scaling it over time. So making sure researchers also feel like they have some ownership. Research ops should never be the team that comes in and says, this is how you do it. We should say, we want you to do it this way because we think it'll make it easier for you to do your work. So be a human about it. Don't be the new guy coming in telling everyone what to do. I think, that's where I think I love people, and that's what really drove me into this profession, was people and influencing and just being a human being. So I hope that answers that question, but
Yeah, no, it definitely comes across, and yeah, I think lots of great advice there on getting a lay of the land, learning as much as humanly possible, and then taking bite-sized chunks, trying to get little wins along the way, having lots of coals on different fires so you can start driving as much impact as possible, as quickly as possible. Cool. So on people, we got another question over here. There were a few questions on hiring, but I'll just show this message on the stage from Doug about he's interested in adding their first research ops member to the team. What are some similarities and differences in the profiles for a good ReOps pro relative to a good UXR?
Good question. I think that, to be honest, I have sat in loops for UXRs, but I've never designed the discussion guides for hiring in those spaces. But I think that from my experience, what I have found is you need someone who can represent themselves well. It doesn't mean that they have to be tailored up, buttoned up to the top and physically look good, but they know what they're talking about and they're comfortable talking to people. I think that's important both on the UXR side and the ReOps side. And you have to have someone who has some confidence in their craft. I have hired people who have never done research ops before in their lives, but they knew ops and they could tell me what a good ops professional looked like. And I would imagine that's very similar in the UXR space. I think one thing to mention, and that's something that I've learned very early in my career, and I don't know if this, doesn't necessarily answer the question, but I think it's a good to add, is that if you are someone who is hiring for ReOps and you know that you need someone to sit in ReOps for the foreseeable future, you need to make sure you're asking that question in those interviews. You need to make sure that it is very clear in your job description that this role is meant to sit in research operations. At this point in time, it is not a trajectory into research. I think that that just level sets everyone's expectations. It doesn't mean you can't go from ReOps to research. I see it all the time. You just have to be really realistic as the hiring manager so that you can properly set the expectations of your candidates. I think the other thing is you want someone to care about your users. We should all be accountable for our users, not just as a UXR, but also as a ResOps person. So I always like to ask, what's the last thing you've learned about our users? And just see what someone was willing to gain leading into an interview. And that always shows me whether they've kind of taken the moment in time to say, I'm going to be dealing with users and I want to make sure I kind of understand who these individuals are, or I have an idea on how I'd like to kind of care for a user, or an example in the past. Hiring the first ReOps hire is a lot. I think that, in my experience, asking questions around operations philosophies can tell you a lot about someone, especially if they haven't existed in the research operations field. I hadn't really done research operations by trade. A manager took a chance on me. And so I believe strongly that research ops background or not, I don't want to say anyone can do this job, but someone with the right skill set, as long as you really know what you're looking for your team and your research team, people can make big impact that you wouldn't have necessarily expected. So hopefully that answers the question. Also very happy to talk about that offline. Whoever asked that question, feel free to jump into my LinkedIn.
Awesome. Very cool. So I guess another question on the hiring piece while we're on it, because you have some unique experience in both B2B and B2C environments and building teams and building process and function. What are some of the major things that you've noticed are differences between the B2B world and B2C when it comes to research ops and growing teams in the space?
Great question. I think that in B2B, or in B2C, let's start there. I think that what I've learned in B2C is, it's really about someone who can, like I keep saying this and I will say this, for as long as I live, it's about people who care about people. You want someone who can come in and give a personality, give an identity to the users that you're designing for. Because yes, we're designing processes for researchers, but these processes are putting a researcher in touch with the user, in touch with a human being. And so you really want to make sure that you have someone who not just has compassion for the users, but also just compassion for a researcher in general and the kind of the plight and the issues they might be having and the pressures they might be under. I think where it gets a little bit different in B2B is you have to take a stock in yourself. I mean, when I got put into the B2B research ops space, I knew what it meant, but I had never done it before. So I started to look to hire someone who had done it before, who had some ideas to bring to the table, who was smarter than me in that space. And so that's where I think just in general, you have to get really crisp on what are my strengths? What do I know? And so what does that mean I need to look for in a hire? I think the other thing to mention on the B2B side is you're going to have to work with sales teams. You're going to have to influence CSMs and account executives to give you access, in most companies, in my experience, to their users. And you need someone who can understand that, CSMs and salespeople, these relationships that they've curated with their accounts are oftentimes the way they're making money. They're the way they're growing in the company. That is their baby, for lack of a better term. So you really need to make sure you're hiring someone who can not just think about who is our enterprise user and how do we treat them with high levels of professionalism and care, but how do I think about building trust and consistency and internal motivators for salespeople to come to the table and want to give us access to those clients? So I think that overall the skill set is the same. People who can think about partners and be strategic, but it's really about that sales mentality is just different. Interacting with sales teams is just different. It is different than research. They might care more about leaderboards or spliffs and things like that, whereas researchers care, a bit more about, their development in the process. Where is their research being viewed? And so you really need someone who can understand what your sales team looks like and what your B2B environment looks like, and then go about tailoring and pulling out skill sets. And I highly recommend, if you're hiring in the B2B space, do some digging on the sales side and understand the types of people they would be willing to work with and the types of personalities they might have in their ops world, and think about whether or not you want to incorporate that into your job description and descriptions and into your recruiting process.
Amazing. Yeah, it all comes back to those relationships again, and I think that's definitely one of the things people underestimate the most, I think, about B2B environments is that need to work with and build really strong relationships with CS and sales. So maybe you can even double click on that and share a strategy or two that has worked in building those relationships with the go-to-market side of the house.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, I did a lot of that work at Airtable with my amazing partners. I'm going to give a shout out to Adele over there at Airtable. She's incredible. So I think that one of the things that really worked for me was, again, you get a lot of anecdotal, a lot of ad hoc feedback on the sales team won't give me access. Okay, well, let's make sure we understand why that's happening. And is that the case? So start with a survey if possible, just a quick poll and understanding, if, send it to CSMs. Have you engaged with research? If yes, why? If no, why? And what would make you more likely to engage with research? And get some data to drive you into the solutions you're looking to deliver. One of the things that I found in my experience just in general was that a lot of times if sales teams sit here and research sits here, but they're meant to work together to drive the company forward. So there's not a lot of organizational motivation. A lot of times sales isn't even evaluated from a performance level on how much they help research. And that's what we found. So we went about working with some CS ops teams to understand what makes a CSM tick? What would make them want to do this for us? And what we found was that, one, they felt like research was a black box. So I help you and then it goes away, and I potentially just wasted, an hour of my time and put maybe an account at risk. And two, this isn't doing anything for me, and I think that it's okay to say that. It's okay to say engaging with research doesn't make a difference in my, my annual bonus. It doesn't make a difference in my outcome at work. And so, why should I trust you? What do you even do? And so some of the things that we did is we realized we needed to do some education and some resourcing around what is research and what is the process. If you do give us an enterprise customer or a B2B customer, what is the process that they're going to be going through? Because these salespeople, they're curating relationships. They can be golfing with these folks. They want to be able to answer the questions. Someone from Apple, the first person they're going to ask about for a research study is their executive. It's their account manager. So that account manager should know, hey, they have a question about research. I know exactly where to go to understand that information so I can tell them exactly what to expect. And then it's about that motivation piece. And what we found was CSMs have different motivation. They want leaderboards, they want spiffs, they want to understand, they want it baked into their performance development. So it means something at the end. I think that the other thing to mention is that, I lost my train of thought, but I know it was a good one. Research doesn't just benefit the product. We were realizing that we could bite-size our insights that we were finding when talking with a CSM's partner and send it back to them so they could use it in their sales, and keeping people on the hook and telling someone, hey, we know you have this issue right now with the platform, but by the way, obviously within full compliance, by the way, they're working on that. So please hang in there with us. That's something they're going to be working on. So, making sure that the research becomes a symbiotic space, both for the salespeople and for your researchers. And that just fosters a better value of research across the company. It elevates research into better spaces. We were thinking about having all hands between the two teams. There's some really exciting stuff. And I think we're just scratching the surface on that space. And I think there's some really exciting things we'll be seeing people do in B2B.
Yeah, awesome. That is super helpful. I'm just going to back into the Q&A. There's another question here about being in a more mature, large research team. How do you encourage buy-in from researchers to new processes or new tools that cause them to change their own habits? How do you navigate the pushback and work through that?
Definitely. In a more mature environment, I think that's where things, they switch a little bit in terms of those meet and greets or those influencing pieces. I think, you have to understand what your researchers need and where they're coming from, but ultimately, you have to get your leaders on board. If you go to researchers and say, this is the new process and you have to do it, and they go up to their director or their manager and say, research ops is telling me I have to do it this way, and their manager is like, forget it. I don't care. Don't worry about it. Do what you need to do. Your process is broken. It becomes a wild, wild west, and all the hard work you did will just start to trickle away, and everyone will start to do things their own way. So you have to start at that leadership level. And that's something I kind of learned the hard way at Spotify. You have to get in and say, okay, this is what we're planning to do. This is how we're planning to build it. tell me what you think. And you have to give them a voice, and you have to give leaders an opportunity to tell you what they think, but then you also have to be able to say, no, but. You have to be able to say, I hear you, great, but I'm a subject matter expert in ops. I know our partners. I know what's going to work and what's not going to work. So let me take some of what you said and some of what I said, and let's marry it together into this process. And then onboard the managers and the directors into it. Show them what it is. Show them why it's important. Sometimes it can even be about, going to another company, finding out if they're doing something similar and say, you know what? Google's been doing this and they've seen a huge return on the quality of their researchers. They're keeping people around for longer. So tell a story, influence them a bit more, and then disseminate it down into the researchers, and gut check against them. I love a pilot. I pilot everything I do. I pilot newsletters I send out, pilot with leaders and with your researchers. And then as you're looking to socialize things, make sure that you're offering yourself up. You're holding trainings, you're recording trainings, you're embedding those new resources into onboarding guides so that it doesn't become this old guard does it this way, new guard does it this way, newbies, it depends on who onboards them. You should have a set of consistency that lives in onboarding, in video resources, in hubs that you've built. And then you have to practice what you preach. If you're going to tell researchers to do something based on a process, do not help them find a workaround. Tell them, I know this might be a burden on your timeline, but this is the process. You as a research ops person have to stay true to the processes that you built. And you have to be able to feel confident in them enough that you can say, I know this might not be ideal for you, but this is why we're doing it and we believe in it. And here's your feedback loop if you want to make sure that you've been heard.
Love it. Lots of really great process and ideas there. And yeah, I know people are already mentioning in the chat that it's all very thought-provoking. So great stuff. Why don't we look maybe a few years in the future and talk a little bit about how you think the research ops discipline and role and function will continue to evolve as the world continues.
How much time do you have, Warren? I think that, there's a million places it can go. And I think that's why I love the space. I think we're just scratching the surface. But I think that where I personally see it going is I see us becoming, and us meaning research ops, I see us becoming at the connector of all the partners. I see research ops sitting right in with design ops, right in with product ops, right in with engineering ops. I think that if you can get the heads of those teams sitting and talking together and aligning their processes and their groups as much as possible, we're really going to see some secret sauce there. And I think that that's going to make superpowers happen. I think the other thing is bringing research ops into the sales side of the business, into the enterprise side of the business. Right now, research ops, from my experience so far, they sit on the research side. And, so when you, as a research ops person, no matter what level you are, you go knocking on the door of CS teams, it's still like, you're that person who's all the way over there, and why should I care about that? So I think that you need to, if we can start to bring research ops, maybe it's enterprise research ops. If we can start to see that build out, which I think we will, I think we're going to see a even bigger amount of enterprise growth, a bigger amount of impact of research, not just on business and product growth, but on the sales teams and the account growth that we can see. And then I think overall, when I was in research ops, it started as just participant management. That was what you did. That was what research ops did. You recruited people, you brought them in, you built the labs, and I loved it. But, even since my time there, we see research library managers. And I think that's another place we'll see a lot of growth, is people who not only build the repositories, but they're responsible for disseminating the information across the team and tracking the value of that information. I would love to see research ops in a position where they could be saying, Oren did this piece of research in Singapore, and I can honestly tell you that that piece of research amounted to this business decision, which amounted to this product being built or this market being, opened up for us. And now we've seen X amount of revenue or X amount of growth for our company. I think that researchers, by all means, can do that work, but by the time they've shipped something, they're on to the next thing. So why shouldn't research ops be the one who can be in there and tracking things? And I think the last one is compliance. A lot of people, privacy is a blocker for a lot of organizations. And I think that there's a lot of really intelligent people in research ops who care about privacy. They're very up to speed on GDPR. And I think that's a place where we should start to see research ops privacy program managers. And some companies have them, but I think we should have more and more companies have them. And we should champion research ops individuals to be in those meetings with legal and privacy and dictating policy. Obviously, we're not lawyers necessarily, but we have an opinion and we know what will work and not work for our users. And that also helps build the trust in researchers into complying with the compliance that our teams put out. Sky's the limit. Research ops should be the center of excellence for operations within a team, because we have not just our researchers holding us accountable, not just our partners holding us accountable, but our users holding us accountable. And I think that that is where research ops differs from a lot of other operations teams. And that's why we should be tapped more as an operational center of excellence.
Love it. And the crowd agrees with the money emojis flying everywhere. That's great. No, yeah, I think it's an amazing role at the nexus of so many of these different pieces, with an incredible opportunity to further differentiate, further specialize, and just bring a ton of value to different parts of the organization. So very cool to hear. We probably have time for one final question here. And there was a good, I think, maybe ending question from someone in the channel about what's the number one thing about ReOps that you wish you knew at the beginning of your journey?
That's an incredible question. I think that one of the things that I wish I knew at the beginning of my journey, that sometimes I've learned the hard way, is not everyone believes in research operations. And I don't think that's a bad thing, honestly. I just think that if you know that from the get-go, you will learn not just to make your researchers happy, but to make sure that things that you are doing are leveling up the company at a whole, and that they're gonna make your team seen as a higher value impact for the company. I think that's especially predominant now, in the layoffs and places looking to reduce their workforce. I think that if you can keep that in mind, obviously it's out of your control, but if you can keep that in mind and you can say research ops, we're not just here because everyone loves research and everyone loves research operations and believes in it. We have critical partners, so we should keep an eye on who those partners are, and we should understand and be able to tell the story quickly on a dime as to the impact that we're making to the company and the product and the business growth at a high level. And I think that if I had known that, I can't say it would have changed anything, but I think that it would have definitely made sure that as I'm growing teams and I'm thinking about putting headcount forward and, requesting resources and things like that, I was keeping those critical people in mind a bit more. And that's something that I had wished I'd known. It's definitely something I know now, and I do the best I can with that. But again, a lot of it's out of your control. So.
Love it. Super helpful advice. And yeah, Alyssa, I think made a great point in the chat about making research ops a must-have versus a nice to have. And I think the way you've explained it about building these relationships, about aligning the goals with the company objectives, about starting with leadership, about building impactful process, I think all of that funnels into making research ops a must-have. But yeah, I guess you're not alone on this journey. There's hundreds of people tuning in to hear the same story.
I'm very humbled. And if anyone, had a question that I didn't get to answer, please just join my LinkedIn. I love to talk. As you can tell, I could talk forever. So very happy to keep the conversation going and help where I can, and, use my network to help anyone else who's out there in my position of just, looking for that next full-time opportunity in this crazy, crazy world. So.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Kaela. This has been an awesome AMA, and yeah, the crowd is thanking you, calling you the ReOps queen, and I think this was super awesome.
Amazing. And thank you, Oren. I just want to say to all of you out there, Oren was a huge, Oren and the Rally team, we're a huge blessing, both like personally and from a career perspective in my journey through research operations and layoffs. So, they have great content, they have great people, and they're just great human beings. So I'm honored, not just that you guys wanted to talk to me, but that Rally wanted to have me on. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So thank you, Oren and Lauren and team who's out there. And thank you all for hearing what I have to say.
Thank you, Kaela. This has been amazing. And yeah, you're the best. Excited to keep on partnering and keep on learning from you.
Definitely. Bye, y'all.
Alrighty. Bye, everyone. Great day.